Story 1. In my tourist city, there are big lifted trucks towing sparkling wakesetter boats. It's all based on credit, and we know it. You're not fooling anyone. Story 2. Buying counterfeit luxury brand goods, such as bags and purses, is common. Another example is people purchasing a 10-year-old used Mercedes-AMG S-Class. The first issue with that car could lead to significant expenses. Instead, consider buying a new Corolla or any vehicle within your budget and focus on enjoying your life. Story 3. Money talks. Wealth whispers. Those who make a lot of noise and show off may or may not have money, but they certainly do not possess true wealth. Story 4. My butler, Barkley, occasionally acts as if he were a member of the gentry rather than a man of humble means. Just last week, I found him polishing his shoes, his casual footwear instead of the impeccable service attire that I require. The pretentiousness of it was simply too much, and I reprimanded him accordingly. Story 5. Buying a Tesla and then using it to drive for Uber because you couldn't really afford that Tesla. That person stays in my thoughts. Story 6. My former hairstylist owns a Jaguar and a Corvette and makes sure everyone knows. Her facade slipped once when she mentioned that money was very tight after a vacation that she clearly could not afford. She is a single mother. The math does not add up. Story 7. Expensive watches, modern muscle cars, and continuous social media posts featuring lavish dinners or brief vacations. Story 8. When they access the internet instead of having their butler do it for them. Story 9. I am an entrepreneur with businesses all over. I deal with property management. Any prospect that uses that line, I can bet my paycheck they will default in 6 months or less. Story 10. I have a luxury brand car that I bought used because I refused to buy brand new. I got a great deal and have a reliable vehicle that will last me a decade with proper maintenance. While I was at the dealership getting an oil change, a man came in and was bragging loudly about how he was there to look at a new car. I heard him talking to the salesperson he apparently works with frequently, discussing how he planned to upgrade to the newest model and wanted to check his credit to see about getting a new vehicle. He seemed to think he looked impressive by pursuing the latest model. I found it amusing how misguided he sounded. I can't imagine how much money he has wasted by rolling over his old loans into new ones and remaining constantly in debt, likely being his salesperson's easiest commission every year. He sees himself as cool for being an easy target. Story 11. I know a girl who tricks lonely, pathetic men into lending her money for trips. She takes pictures of herself on these trips and posts them on social media. Then, she does everything she can to avoid paying them back. Story 12. I must admit that I love my sparkles. Having been around truly wealthy individuals, I've noticed they don't flaunt their wealth. They prefer to hide in plain sight. Story 13. Those individuals on Instagram who claim to be entrepreneurs by engaging in questionable activities often criticize those who are trying to make an honest living. Story 14. We had an issue at work for months. The female staff members consistently left the area untidy. The staff room was dirty all the time. They would not wash their dirty plates or would sit with trash next to them because cleaning up after oneself was seen as a sign of being poor. Wealthy individuals avoid cleaning, leaving messes for others to manage. This mentality was absolutely aggravating. Story 15. I find people who feel the need to keep sharing the prices of things to pretend that when they say, "Man, I need new nails again. I'm going to be out a certain amount of money," or "Do you like my haircut? It was $400. I don't find anything else to be flashy since people have different fashion senses. I even have cars, but it's specifically flaunting in a way where you want others to know the cost. Story 16. Having a flashy car and keeping it in the garage all week, only parking it in the driveway for when friends visit, so they can show it off. Story 17. I live in Las Vegas. There are many groups of people excitedly saying, "Las Vegas isn't ready for us," all while carrying their outlet mall coach purses. Story 18. The silverware is too new. The table and other items are not suitable. The ambition is too unrefined. There are monograms, and the worst is monograms on shirt cuffs. The hairstyle looks copied from television news. Possessions are treated the way children treat toys. Staff is undertipped. treated rudely, or gossiped with. Non-you language is used. The biggest offenders I hear now in the United States include home for house, limo for car, wealthy for rich, and the persistent offender, gorgeous for beautiful. You put gold plate everywhere to such an extent that the Oval Office resembles a marble men's room from the 1980s. You care what others think not out of consideration for them and politeness for yourself, but to show off or because, for some reason, knowing that other people are aware of your wealth pleases you. You engage in activities like sailing, skiing, listening to National Public Radio, or starting a foundation for the status those activities confer upon you rather than out of genuine interest. You place stickers inside the windows of your car announcing a selective college or university. As many others have noted, you wear clothes with labels and logos. More generally, you use corporate logos and brands to enhance your self-worth rather than finding value in yourself, as that is part of living a happy and healthy life. Story 19. People who are obsessed with having visible brand logos on clothing often do so for status. However, truly wealthy individuals may look exceptional but prefer to keep their wealth discreet. Story 20. Making simple decisions that show you don't understand money. I live near the famous 8 Mile Road in a suburb bordering Detroit. 6 months ago, I accidentally received my neighbor's mail regarding why they were denied a loan for a Ford Fusion. I accidentally opened it, and I don't think I should have done that. For the last month, they have had a Mercedes-Benz SUV in their driveway. The home is a rental and they have a daughter. I just can't fathom putting an extra $750 into what people think of you rather than investing in your future or her future. I make 6 figures and cringe at my $300 car payment. Story 21. Name brand everything either suggests irresponsibility or implies wealth combined with a lack of self-awareness regarding self-worth and value tied to brands and appearance. It reflects either superficiality or financial struggles. Story 22. The cheapest lease specifications for BMW, Mercedes, and Audi. I work in the automotive aftermarket, and every time someone complains about the price and asks if we could offer it cheaper, they are usually driving one of these vehicles that they have stretched themselves to barely afford. Story 23. Spending money on expensive clothing, footwear, jewelry, and leasing luxury cars and houses just to show off on social media. Story 24. Watches. Observing people who spend an entire paycheck on one is fascinating, especially when considering the lengths they go to maintain the appearance. Story 25. When they intentionally leave the tags on clothing or accessories for everyone to see. We understand you may not be able to afford this, spent your savings on it, and now want everyone to notice. Story 26. Complaining about how much you spend when your cart contains only expensive, non-essential items like cigarettes, alcohol, and candy. Story 27. Ostentatiousness about presumed wealth is evident. The more someone displays it, the more they are pretending. Clothing can also be a significant indicator. Individuals who pretend to be wealthy often lack awareness of what genuinely wealthy people wear in various situations. The appropriate attire varies according to socioeconomic status, as there are different types of wealthy individuals. However, pretenders often resemble lottery winners who are likely to go broke soon, rather than matching the wealth level they aspire to. Story 28. Someone who secures a good position within a company suddenly changes their attitude, driving a luxury vehicle, carrying an overpriced purse and watch, and dining at upscale restaurants, even though they still struggle to use utensils properly. Story 29. I'd be careful with some of this. I rarely buy luxury items for myself, but I have a generous boyfriend. Designer goods combined with a humble background probably made me look like I was trying to seem wealthy. Nope, I am just enjoying my gift. Story 30. My grandmother's cousin and her husband lost their house to foreclosure in their 60s and were struggling financially. She always wore large rings on almost every finger. Although she was a sweet lady, there was a facade of prestige that felt insincere. Throughout my life, I have associated wearing many rings with being a pretender. My last girlfriend only reinforced that belief. Story 31. They are wearing designer items from that fashion house's outlet store. Yes, Ashley, we know your purse is from Coach Outlet and not Coach. Story 32. Having decorative towels, pillows, candles, and soaps that no one is allowed to use clearly shows that you are pretending to be better off than you are. By making your house look nice but preventing use of these items, you also communicate that you cannot afford to replace them. Story 33. A $500 Versace shirt and $500 Jordans with busted teeth and face tattoos. A 15-year-old Mercedes with shiny rims and bald tires. A flashy Rolex, or worse, a Patek Philippe. You aren't fooling anyone. Money talks. Wealth whispers. This doesn't apply to Miami or Las Vegas. That's the nouveau riche Mecca where you'll fit in perfectly with the fake it till you make it crowd. Story 34. One of my best friends during my freshman year of college talked constantly about his wealth, how nice his house was, and the size of his trust fund. We attended school in New England, and he was from the Midwest, so he could easily get away with his tall tales. Who was going to fly across the United States to fact check? The sad thing is that I trusted him wholeheartedly and fell for it completely. It wasn't until someone pointed out that his lies were becoming more and more grandiose that I realized what was happening. He also made many negative comments about my less than ideal financial background. Looking back, that was clearly his way of deflecting. Needless to say, we stopped being friends before sophomore year was even over. Story 35. Bragging about owning depreciating assets like vehicles, especially when these assets are being financed, is not advisable. Story 36. A button connected to a speaker that, when pressed, makes a sound of someone screaming, "I'm pretending to be rich." Story 37. Luxury cars and trucks are owned by people who pay exorbitant amounts in leasing fees while struggling to afford rent. Story 38. Only purchasing heavily branded luxury items, including items that are covered in logos or fully draped in clothing adorned with luxury brand logos. Story 39. Going out of their way to complain about low-income individuals. They keep bringing it up so everyone knows they are not one of them. Story 40. Someone was supposed to pay me $80, but they couldn't because their bank application shut down due to receiving too much money. Story 41. Gucci moccasins are worn with their dad's old tracksuit because it's vintage. The tracksuit is from 90s JJB Sports, appears as if it has never been washed, could slice a melon in half with the stiffness of the legs, and smells vaguely of despair. This look is often complemented by a wispy mustache of fine, soft facial hair and a thick curb chain. It is commonly adopted by residents of local housing estates and the people living in the flat above the chip shop. Story 42. Those people whose whole personality becomes about being wealthy act as if they are above everyone else. Story 43. I have met 3 incredibly wealthy individuals in my life. The first was an air traffic controller whose parents owned an oil field. He had modest cars and one fancy car that he rarely drove, keeping it locked away. The second was the owner of Lovers right after they sold the company. They lived in a massive house. They also drove modest cars but kept them locked away. She once told me that anyone who drives fancy cars is foolish and does not understand how to manage their wealth. The third wealthy person I met drove the most modest of cars. They were still nice, but not a luxury brand or anything extravagant, and he also had an old vehicle. I asked them about cars and how to spot a fake rich person. They shared several insights, noting that wealth is relative and what is considered rich to some may not be to others. They explained that the best way to retain wealth and stay wealthy is to manage money, stocks, and investments. One must care about these matters to preserve their wealth. People who only want to appear rich often buy the fanciest cars, the latest fashion, and exotic jewelry. Since they do not care about retaining wealth, they care more about looking wealthy to others. He mentioned that I specifically noticed the car aspect because it is an investment. If you purchase a good vehicle and take care of it as an investment, you will not need to keep buying more cars, which could be seen as wasting money. Buying a luxury car just because you can indicates a lack of concern for retaining wealth. In contrast, purchasing a reliable car and maintaining it shows that you value your financial resources. I realize that this perspective may not hold true in every situation. There are many ultra-wealthy individuals who waste money, and perhaps they do not need to care about their wealth to be okay. I am not sure. Story 44. Two guys used to ride the train when I lived in Queens. They would talk about the stocks they were trading and how easy it was to make money out of thin air. One day, they rode with a third guy who stayed behind after they got off at their stop. I asked the guy how he happened to meet them, as I hadn't seen them together before. Those guys? Yeah, they're janitors at the country club my dad owns. Story 45. Range Rover. I worked at a bank for years, and every person who pulled up to the drive-thru in a Range Rover seemed to struggle financially after they paid for their unattractive car and oversized house. Many were always 1 month away from having their car or house repossessed. Story 46. Logos are everywhere. I don't care if it is a $396 purple label polo shirt. Unless you are being paid to advertise, it is a waste of your money. Story 47. A family member and I had a conversation. She works as a receptionist, earning around $14 per hour or less. I earn significantly more than she does, about 3 times her income. I don't comment on her lifestyle choices because I understand what it's like to live on a tight budget. I used to make sacrifices, shop at thrift stores, and make do with what I had. However, she prefers to buy new items, refuses to shop at thrift stores, and insists on name-brand products for groceries, often dismissing stores like Aldi. She criticizes me for my lifestyle, pointing out that my newest car is 10 years old and my other car is over 20 years old, which I use for work. She suggests I need to buy a bigger house and invest in name-brand clothing instead of basic solid-color t-shirts, socks, and underwear from bulk purchases. She disapproves of my furniture, implying it's cheap because I have relied on items from Walmart or pieces that have had multiple previous owners. I finally had to confront her and explain, the reason I have savings isn't solely because I earn more money. It's because I avoid unnecessary spending. I learned to manage my finances tightly when I was on student loan financial aid, making $1,200 last for an entire semester after paying for rent, books, and classes. Even when I earned minimum wage, I focused on budgeting effectively to ensure I wouldn't run out of money before my next paycheck. I chose to eat at home rather than dining out at fast food restaurants. I bought cars I could afford rather than the ones I wanted. You operate on the principle that if you have money, you should spend it. I believe that if I don't need something, I shouldn't purchase it. Why buy an expensive version when a cheaper option serves the same purpose? A cheap shirt and a name brand shirt both cover me, so why pay more to advertise another company's brand? If I lived according to your lifestyle, I would be just as financially strained. So please understand that I cannot take lifestyle and financial advice from someone who has to save up to afford a movie ticket, soda, and a small popcorn. Story 48. Every social media post is filled with labels. Want to see my outfit of the day? Here it is with my Chanel purse front and center. I got my nails done. Here they are on top of my steering wheel, so you can see the Mercedes logo. Look at all the brand-name birthday presents I received. Or even better, look at all the fancy gifts I bought my friend for her birthday. I'm such a good and generous friend. Story 49. Wearing and discussing your wealth is notable. Years ago, I worked with a nightclub owner who would never refer to his car simply as my car. It was always the Range Rover. Buddy, you leased the vehicle. Story 50. Expensive clothing and cars. All the wealthiest people I have ever met wore Kirkland brand clothing and drove the same used cars for 10 to 20 years. They do not care about trying to impress others. Story 51. A pristine short bed truck with the luxury package. It is almost always individuals with financial difficulties purchasing at high rates using credit. Story 52. Obvious designer attire includes a full Gucci outfit. Wealthy individuals often choose expensive items that are more understated, which the average person may not easily recognize. Story 53. My soon-to-be former son-in-law has a BMW 5 Series, a country club membership, and orders Uber Eats every night. He is impeccably dressed, wears $600 golf shoes, and buys new $2,000 golf clubs every 18 months. He is a lazy consultant who chooses not to work for months at a time. He has bad credit and owes money to the IRS, his mother, and his brother. He has drained my daughter's finances. Story 54. Always posting their items like Rolex and Birkin, And honestly, if they are consistently sharing a lot of those items, most likely a few are duplicates anyway. Story 55. High-end clothing often features prominent branding, such as Louis Vuitton bags. Some people try very hard to demonstrate their wealth, but genuinely wealthy individuals typically do not care who knows about their financial status. In fact, they often prefer to keep it private. Story 56. Calling their expensive products by their brand name. It's not a mug, it's a Yeti. We'll take the Audi and so on. Story 57. BMW or Mercedes vehicles of any kind, but if they drive the entry-level model, it screams, "I wish I were wealthy." Story 58. Being pretentious about gourmet food and wine is common. I have bartended and waited tables in various establishments, and I've noticed that wealthy individuals are typically confident in their choices and order what they enjoy. Taste is subjective. It is often people who pretend to be affluent and act knowledgeable about wines and fine wood who complain the most. Story 59. People who are obsessed with luxury brands won't be seen without some kind of Gucci, Prada, or Chanel product. It is often quite noticeable when items are fake. However, even wealthy individuals do not wear those brands very often and tend to fly under the radar for the most part. Story 60. A luxury vehicle with collision damage because they cannot afford to pay their insurance deductible to have it repaired. Story 61. People who announce what they own by its brand name. "I'll drive my Audi to your place," or something similar. Story 62. They spend money they do not have to buy things they do not need to impress people who do not care. Thanks a bunch for sticking around till the end of the video. Remember to subscribe, and until next time, stay awesome and goodbye.